I always kept the important things in the cedar chest at the foot of my bed. Not just because cedar kept the moths away, but because it held memories tight, like it respected them. Birth certificates, my wedding veil, the hand-stitched baby quilt from when Brian was born, and a folder with papers that bore our name. Hartwell, in big, bold type. The original deed to the house was in there, wrapped in tissue paper like it was made of gold. Because to me it was, they didn't know that. And that was the first mistake. It started 2 months after my husband, Carl, passed. The house got noisier. Not in sound, but in energy. In footsteps that didn't belong to grief. In voices that didn't whisper out of respect anymore. Brian and his wife, Celeste, started treating my home like a waiting room for whatever came next. "It's just temporary, Mom," Brian had said, dragging boxes into the front hall. "We're figuring things out." Figuring things out turned into repainting the guest room without asking. Then came Celeste's niece, Haley, who just needed a place to crash for a few weeks. That girl had more clothes than I had years left, and not once did she say thank you. She called me Maggie instead of Grandma, and left half-eaten takeout in the sink. I didn't say much. At first, my daughter Elise visited one Sunday in June. She brought flowers and a pie, but I could see it in her eyes. She was circling, like a vulture that didn't want to seem rude. "Mom," she said, cutting into the pie she brought, "have you updated your will since Dad passed?" I looked at her. She didn't blink. "No," I said. "Why?" She gave a little shrug. "Just thinking ahead. It's a lot of property. You wouldn't want things getting messy." That was rich, considering her own house was a shoebox barely bigger than her car. "Messy?" I said calmly. "You mean like how your brother and his wife turned my sunroom into an Amazon warehouse?" She blinked, then smiled like I was joking. But I wasn't. The next week, I overheard Celeste on the phone. "No, she hasn't signed anything yet. We're working on it. Brian's going to bring it up again this weekend." I stood in the hallway, heart pounding. When I stepped into the room, she nearly dropped her phone. "Oh, Maggie. I mean, Mom, I didn't know you were home. I live here," I said flatly. She stammered something about needing to check on Haley's car and disappeared. That night, I sat with Carl's old ledger, flipping through the pages he'd kept so neatly. Property taxes, utility bills, deed references, everything documented like a man who trusted no one. And rightly so. I went to the cedar chest, unlocked it with the little brass key I kept around my neck, and pulled out the envelope marked Hartwell Estate. The deed was still there, with Carl's full signature, and mine, untouched, unshared, unwitnessed by anyone in that house. I slept better that night than I had in weeks. 2 days later, Brian invited me to lunch. We went to a little diner near the courthouse, a place I hadn't been to in years. He talked about work, the kids, the rising cost of living. Then came the real reason. "Mom, listen," he said gently. "Celeste and I were thinking it might be time to get things in order. Just in case." "In case of what?" "You know, if something were to happen. You're getting older." I held up a hand. "Don't." He paused, then smiled like a car salesman. "We're just trying to help. We could take the paperwork off your hands. Store it. Make sure everything's where it should be." That was his mistake. He thought I didn't know where it was. I smiled politely. "I'll think about it." And I did, all the way home. That evening, I went looking for the envelope again. The cedar chest was unlocked, and the envelope was gone. Panic slammed into me like a wave. I pulled everything out. Photo albums, fabric swatches, Carl's retirement watch, and searched every fold, every corner. Nothing. I sat there on the floor, heart pounding in my ears. My hands trembled, not from age, but from fury. They went through my things. They touched what wasn't theirs. But then I remembered, 2 years ago when Carl was first diagnosed. He'd made copies, legal ones. Certified, filed and notarized. One stayed with the lawyer, one with our safety deposit box, and one was in the false bottom drawer of the sewing table in the basement, where no one ever went. I crept down that night, after everyone had gone to bed, pulled back the fabric scraps, lifted the baseboard. There it was, neatly folded, sealed, untouched. The real deed, not the copy. The original, still under my name, still binding, still mine. The next morning, I made coffee and waited. Celeste came into the kitchen in her robe, looking smug. Brian followed, holding an envelope, the one they stole. He cleared his throat. "Hey Mom, we found something in your room. We thought you might have forgotten you had it." He placed it on the counter like it was his to return. I smiled. "Oh, that? No. That's just a placeholder copy." I lied smoothly. "Carl used to keep duplicates in case we needed them for bank statements." Their faces fell. Celeste's lips tightened. Brian tried to recover. "Well, still, we thought we should hold on to it for you." I stood, walked to the drawer and pulled out a new envelope. Unmarked. "This," I said, placing it beside his, "is the only one that matters, and it's going to stay with me." I leaned in, lowering my voice, just enough. "You see, I knew you'd try something." They blinked. "I'm old," I continued. "Not stupid." Celeste crossed her arms. "We were just trying to help." "No," I said. "You were trying to control something that doesn't belong to you. And now that I know how far you'll go." I let the words hang in the air. They didn't need finishing. That afternoon I called my lawyer. Then I called a locksmith. The locks were changed within a week. My will was updated and locked with a password. And Brian, he stopped calling for a while. Which was fine by me, because I wasn't just defending a house. I was protecting a legacy. And I wasn't done yet. The air in the house shifted after that morning. Not immediately. Not like a slammed door or broken glass. But slowly, like paint peeling in the corner of a room you no longer notice. Tense silences replaced fake morning greetings. The clinking of mugs in the kitchen sounded a little louder, and I noticed Celeste had stopped baking her stress muffins. I suppose even manipulation needs a preheated oven. It had been 5 days since I let them know I still had the real deed. 5 days since I changed the locks, updated my will, and burned every copy of paperwork I didn't want them near. I had played the polite game long enough. It was time they knew exactly who they were dealing with. So when Brian knocked on my door that Friday morning, I already knew what he wanted. He walked in, carrying 2 lattes and a paper bag that smelled like apple fritters, his peace offering. "Morning, Mom." I took the bag. "Morning." He sat across from me at the kitchen table, clearing his throat. "I've been thinking," he started, "about what you said the other day, about the deed and the will." I waited. "I want to apologize. I didn't mean to overstep." I raised an eyebrow. "You mean you didn't mean to get caught?" He gave a sheepish smile, and ran his hand through his hair like he did when he was a teenager trying to explain a dent in the car. "Fair." We sat in silence for a moment. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a yellow envelope. "This is from Celeste," he said, sliding it across the table. "She said it's just an updated version of the inheritance plan. Nothing binding. Just something for you to look over." I didn't touch it. "Updated, huh?" I said calmly. "Funny, last I checked, inheritances weren't up for committee vote." Brian's smile cracked. I opened the envelope slowly. Deliberate. Inside were 5 sheets of paper with a new property breakdown. The house was listed under joint ownership, pending maternal transfer. That phrase alone made my blood boil. Maternal transfer. as if I were some old modem being passed down for parts. I smiled sweetly. I'll have my lawyer review it. Brian looked relieved. Really? Wow, that's great, Mom. I stood, opened the drawer behind me, and pulled out a different envelope. One I'd prepped the night before. This, I said, sliding it toward him, is my version. He opened it and blinked. It was a scanned copy of the real deed without signatures, without seals, and without value, but it looked official enough. I wanted you to have your own copy, I said with a pleasant smile, so you don't feel left out. He looked confused, but nodded. Thanks, I guess. Don't mention it, literally, ever again. That evening, Celeste cornered me in the laundry room. I was folding towels when she entered like a soap opera villain, arms crossed, lips painted and eyes narrowed. You gave Brian a fake copy. I didn't flinch. I gave him a version. That's what you asked for. You're playing games, Maggie. And you're not? She scoffed. You think this little power trip will last. You're old. You're tired, eventually. We'll be the ones making decisions for you. I looked her dead in the eye. And you think that day will come while you're still under my roof? Silence. I've lasted longer than a lot of people expected me to, Celeste. Including Carl's doctor. I've buried a husband, raised 2 kids, kept this house standing through storms, floods, and your niece's failed art career. Do you really think I can't survive you? She turned on her heel and left. I folded the last towel with a little extra pleasure. The next week was quiet. Too quiet. That's how I knew something was brewing. Sure enough, I overheard Haley on the phone in the hallway one afternoon. They're trying again this weekend. She won't budge. It's kinda iconic, honestly. But yeah, they're pulling out the big guns now. Some meeting or something. A meeting? With who? On Saturday morning, Elise arrived, my daughter, the responsible one. She came in wearing pearls and fake concern. Mom, can we talk? I was in the garden trimming the hydrangeas. I didn't stop. Talk. She sat on the bench, smoothing her skirt. I spoke with Brian and Celeste. They're really worried about you. I finally looked up. Worried. They said you've been forgetful, that you're making rash decisions, that you're old and confused. She bit her lip. Not in those words. I set the shears down and sat across from her. Elise, I said calmly. Do you know what your father told me before he passed? She shook her head. He said, don't let the house go without a fight. They'll try. And here you are, proving him right. She went silent. I know what this is about. I continued. The house, the value, the inheritance. But let me remind you. None of it belongs to you. Her face hardened. It will, eventually. Not if I sell it first. That got her attention. Her mouth opened, then closed again. I haven't decided yet, I said. But I'm done playing nice. I stood and walked back to the house. The next day, Celeste held a family meeting. I wasn't invited, but I watched through the cracked door as they sat around the living room. Brian, Elise, Celeste, even Haley, talking in hushed tones and concerned voices. They were planning something. That night, I packed a small suitcase, locked the original deed in a fireproof box, and called my lawyer. It's time, I said. 3 days later, I posted a for sale by owner sign on the front lawn. I waited until Sunday to plant the sign. I woke early, made a cup of coffee, and stood by the front window watching the sleepy street unfold. Birds chirped, a jogger passed by with a golden retriever. The kind of morning that made everything feel calm until you dropped a truth bomb into it. With slow, deliberate steps, I walked out and pressed the wooden stake into the lawn. It read, "For sale by owner. No agents, no game," and underneath, just one line in red ink, "Private showings only." I didn't say a word to anyone. I didn't have to. By 10 a.m., Brian was outside squinting at the sign like it was written in another language. "Mom?" he called through the door. "Is this real?" I didn't respond. I let him knock, wait, and knock again. At 10:30 a.m., Celeste stormed in without waiting for an answer. "You're not seriously selling the house," she snapped. I looked up from my crossword puzzle. "I'm seriously entertaining offers. Without even telling us." "You mean like how you changed my room, rewrote my will, and started calling my lawyer behind my back?" She paused. Her lips moved, but nothing came out. "You can't just sell it out from under us," she finally said. "Oh, but I can," I said, folding the newspaper. "You hid the inheritance papers, remember? So I assumed we were all playing our own games now." Brian walked in behind her, voice low, trying to smooth things over. "Mom, come on, let's be reasonable." I gave him a tight smile. "I've been reasonable for 69 years. Reasonable got me ignored, sidelined, and nearly written out of my own home." Celeste stepped forward. "You can't sell without talking to a realtor." I raised a brow. "Is that your way of offering?" She went red. Brian changed the subject. "You're just doing this to scare us. You'd never actually sell." I stood up. "Wouldn't I?" That afternoon, I called Carol. She was my neighbor from 3 houses down, a retired mortgage officer, who still knew the pulse of every potential buyer in the neighborhood. "Margaret," she said with a little chuckle, "you just made Sunday more exciting than the Super Bowl." Within 24 hours, she'd put the word out, quietly, only to people she trusted. By Tuesday morning, I had 3 voicemails on my answering machine, and a note under my front door. "Arlene Whitaker." The note read, "Heard you're selling. Would love to see the place. I live near the lake. Retired, no agents, just interest. Call me anytime." I called her that evening. She had a warm, honeyed voice, the kind that made you think of homemade pies and porch conversations. We agreed to meet on Thursday afternoon. That gave me 2 days to prepare. Not the house, me. I dusted the living room. Yes. Swept the walkway, sure. But the real preparation was emotional. I had to be reary to let go if it came to that. Thursday arrived cloudy but bright. Arlene pulled up in a navy sedan. She was petite with neat gray curls and pale green eyes. A small dog popped up from the passenger seat. Some kind of schnauzer or shih tzu. "This is Benny," she said, stepping out. "Hello, Benny," I replied. She walked slowly but with confidence. Her coat was pressed, her shoes clean, and her handshake firm. "You have a beautiful home," she said immediately. "Thank you." We walked through the house together, room by room. She noticed the hand-carved mantel Carl built in '87. She paused at the embroidered quilt on the guest bed. She even admired the crown molding Celeste once called dated. And when we reached the kitchen, she turned to me. "I can see the love in these walls." I smiled. "Most people just see square footage." "That's their mistake." We sat on the back porch with lemonade and watched the wind nudge the garden. Benny snoozed at her feet. "May I ask why you're selling?" she said softly. I hesitated. "My son and his wife tried to cut me out of my own home," I finally said. "Thought I wouldn't notice if they made a few papers disappear. But I kept the original deed, and I've kept a clear head. Selling isn't my first choice, but if it's the only way to be respected, then so be it." Arlene didn't offer pity. She offered understanding. "I once had to do the same," she said. "My nephew thought my condo would be his inheritance. Then he tried to move his girlfriend in without asking." I raised an eyebrow. "Did you sell it?" Sold it the next day. We both laughed. As we walked back to her car, she paused. I won't rush you, she said, but if you do decide to sell, I'd like to be first in line. I nodded. I'll keep your number close. That night, over dinner, Brian brought it up again. So, you had a showing today? I did. He was trying not to show panic, but it was bubbling just beneath the surface. Are you serious about selling to someone else? I took a bite of my chicken. You didn't seem concerned when you tried to erase my name. Celeste didn't speak. She just poked at her salad like it had personally offended her. I was thinking, Brian said, maybe we could have a proper conversation. Just us, about what you want. No pressure. I looked him in the eye. What I want is to live in peace, in my own house, without feeling like I'm being watched, managed, or scheduled like a houseplant. He swallowed. Okay. Tomorrow, I said. You, me, and a lawyer. I'll bring the original deed, and we'll talk about boundaries. Celeste dropped her fork. Brian didn't argue. I arrived 10 minutes early at the lawyer's office, just to be sure I was seated before Brian and Celeste came in. It was a small, beige building tucked between a bank and a chiropractor, with a faded sign that read Watkins and Burke, attorneys at law. I had chosen this office not because it was the fanciest, but because Judith Watkins, the senior partner, had been in my Sunday book club for 12 years. She knew better than to patronize me. She also knew how to draft documents with sharp teeth. I clutched the manila folder in my lap. The one with Carl's name on the original deed. The same deed Brian and Celeste thought they could overwrite behind my back. Judith opened the door with a smile. Come on in, Margaret. I've got the documents ready. I walked in slowly, the years heavy in my knees, but my spine straight. I wasn't here as someone's aging mother. I was here as a property owner. And this time, I wasn't alone in a room full of whispers. Brian and Celeste arrived 3 minutes late, bickering quietly outside the glass door before walking in with faces set like stone. Mom, Brian said with a forced calm. Can we just talk before we drag lawyers into it? Judith raised an eyebrow and said, You're free to leave if you think this is unnecessary. That shut him up. We sat across a long oak table. Judith placed the folder in front of me and opened it with care, revealing the original, unaltered deed to the property. The one Carl and I signed together 37 years ago. The one that still had my full ownership rights etched in ink. Let's get one thing clear, Judith began. This house belongs solely to Margaret Hart. Any inheritance claims, past or future, are irrelevant, unless she explicitly states otherwise in legal writing. Celeste leaned forward. We weren't trying to steal anything. We were just trying to prepare for the future. Judith didn't flinch. Preparing the future without consent is how people lose it entirely. Brian exhaled slowly. Okay, Mom, you made your point. But selling the house, isn't that a bit extreme? I looked directly at him. What you did was extreme. Hiding mail from the estate attorney, removing my personal items from the guest room, changing locks on my own filing cabinet. Celeste opened her mouth to deny it, but Judith pulled out a second document. This is a notarized statement from Margaret's neighbor, Carol McIntyre. She witnessed your wife entering the home office through a window while Margaret was away for the weekend. She also saw her carrying documents. Celeste went pale. Carol is senile. She probably saw a bird. Judith snapped the folder shut. Enough. Margaret has a choice to make. Either she files this paperwork to reaffirm the deed and place the house in an irrevocable trust, or she puts it on the market. I'm here to execute either decision. Brian looked at me. His eyes had softened, maybe for the first time in weeks. Mom, what do you want? He asked quietly. I took a breath and said, I want to be respected, I want peace, and I want to stay in my home without worrying about what's being planned behind closed doors. Judith slid another paper forward. Then let's put it in writing. We left the office with new documents in hand. The house was now legally locked down in a trust under my sole discretion, with a clause that stated, any party found to be coercing or tampering with the owner's decisions forfeits all future claim or interest in the property. I had underlined that clause in front of Brian and Celeste before signing it with Judith as witness. No one said a word on the way to the car. That night, I had dinner alone. Not because they weren't home, but because I needed to feel the silence again. Real silence. Not the kind that sits in a room with judgment or tension, the kind that hugs you from the inside. I ate leftover chicken and mashed potatoes, then made myself a cup of tea. I turned on the old record player in the living room and let Patsy Cline fill the house with warmth. I sat on the couch, closed my eyes, and remembered what this home used to feel like before whispers replaced thank yous. It still had the bones of kindness, but they needed polishing. The next morning, Arlene called. I saw the signs still up, she said gently. Are you still thinking of selling? I smiled even though she couldn't see it. I'm keeping my options open. Well, she said, if you ever change your mind, my offer still stands. No pressure, just peace. Thank you, Arlene. She paused. Can I tell you something? My late husband used to say, when people show you who they are around property, believe them the first time. I nodded slowly. Carl used to say something similar, only his version was, people don't just want what's yours, they want the part of it you love most. We both laughed, a soft, knowing laugh. Brian made a quiet effort the next few days. He brought home groceries once, tried to fix the loose stair rail, even offered to cook dinner Thursday night, though the pork chops were dry and the rice was half crunch. But Celeste, she was ice. She walked past me like I was drywall. No eye contact, no greetings, just cold air and tight lips. I could live with that. I'd lived through worse. What I couldn't live with was pretending things would ever be the same. I had shown them the deed. Now I had to show them the door if they crossed me again. The final straw came that Saturday. I walked into the kitchen and saw Celeste standing at the counter, scribbling something on a yellow notepad. I didn't think much of it until I passed by and saw what it said, assisted living options cost comparison, and next to it, a line item, Margaret's Social Security. I didn't say a word. I walked to the hallway, grabbed my purse and left the house. I didn't slam the door. I didn't shout. I didn't even cry. But I made one stop that would change everything. I went to the county records office and pulled up the land survey records for the small lakeside cabin Carl and I had bought back in the one Brian and Celeste never knew about, the one I still had the keys to. The bigger key. The locksmith arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. He was a tall man named Curtis, with salt and pepper hair and a quiet kind of professionalism. Didn't ask questions, just took one look at the old brass doorknobs, nodded and said, looks like you're ready for an upgrade. I offered him coffee. He declined politely and got to work. I stayed nearby, pretending to read the newspaper at the kitchen table while he made his way around the house. With every soft click of his tools, I felt a shift, not just in the hardware of the doors, but in the emotional wiring of the home itself. This house had always been mine, but now it would finally acknowledge it, out loud, in steel. Curtis finished by mid-afternoon. Every exterior door is rekeyed, he said. No one can use the old keys anymore. And here's the new set, just for you. He handed me 3 identical keys, warm from his palm, heavy in my own. As he packed up his toolkit, he looked at me and said gently, good for you. You'd be surprised how many people wait too long. I nodded. Not this time. Brian came home that evening, around 6. He jiggled the doorknob and frowned, knocked twice, then rang the bell like he was a stranger. I answered calmly. New locks, I said. You'll need to ask for a key now. His eyebrows shot up. Are you serious? As a deed with my name on it? I replied. He didn't argue. He just stepped inside. Shoulders tense. I mean, I get it. You're upset, but changing the locks is dramatic, Mom. No, what's dramatic is watching someone make assisted living plans for you while you're still cooking their dinner. His face went pale. He opened his mouth to speak, but I held up my hand. I saw the list on the counter, I said, and I saw my name beside the word Social Security like I'm a budget item. This is my response. He exhaled sharply. Celeste was just thinking out loud, I asked. Plotting quietly? Either way, you didn't stop her. He sat down on the nearest chair, rubbing his forehead. I don't want this to blow up, Mom. Then maybe you should have listened before I had to scream with a locksmith. Celeste came home an hour later. She saw the new key in Brian's hand and paused in the entryway. What's this? Locks are changed, he muttered. We need to ask for keys now. Celeste laughed, a sharp, dry sound. Oh, come on, Margaret, really? This is petty. I looked at her calmly. Petty is pretending to be family while researching facilities for me behind my back. It was just a list. Then tear it up, I said, right now. In front of me. She looked caught, like a kid who got her hand stuck in the cookie jar. I can't believe you're making this house into some kind of power play. It's not a power play, I said. It's a boundary. You crossed mine. Now I'm building a fence. That night I called Carol. You did it? She asked, clearly thrilled. Every lock. Front, back, garage. No old keys work. Good for you, she said. You took your house back. For a few days things were quiet. Not peaceful. Just quieter. Celeste barely spoke to me. Brian walked around like a ghost. The children noticed the change too. My youngest granddaughter, Mia, asked softly one afternoon, Grandma, are you mad at Daddy? No, sweetheart, I said, brushing her hair back gently. I'm just reminding everyone that I'm still here. She smiled and handed me a flower she'd picked from the yard. This is for being here. I nearly cried. Thursday morning brought an unexpected visit. A black SUV pulled into the driveway. A woman stepped out in heels too high for her height, and a suit too crisp for casual conversation. She knocked twice, then smiled through the screen door. Hartley? Yes? I'm Cassandra Lane. I work with Davis Realty. Your daughter-in-law contacted our office about listing your home. I blinked. Listing my, excuse me? She said you were open to starting the process. I just wanted to stop by with paperwork. I opened the door fully. You were misinformed. This house is not for sale through any agency. She looked puzzled. Celeste said she had your consent. I stepped outside, pulled the screen door closed behind me, and said, You can tell Celeste the locks weren't the only thing I changed. The realtor nodded slowly. Would you like me to call her and clear this up? No need, I said. I'll do it myself. When I got back inside, Celeste was in the kitchen, pouring herself coffee like nothing had happened. A realtor stopped by, I said. She froze. Want to explain why she thinks you have the right to list my house? Celeste set the cup down slowly. I thought maybe if you saw what the market value was. You mean if I saw dollar signs, I'd forget what you did. I was just trying to help. No, I said. You were trying to push me out while making it look like a favor. She stepped forward. You don't understand, Margaret. This house is too much for you. It's big, it's old, and frankly, it's time to pass the torch. I stared at her for a long moment. And then I laughed. Not because it was funny, because I was done being polite. You don't get to decide what's too much for me. You don't get to sneak behind my back and think I won't notice." She folded her arms. "So what? You're just going to lock us out? Pretend we were never family?" I took a deep breath. "I'm not locking you out. I'm locking your behavior out. If you can live under this roof with respect, you're welcome. If not, there are realtors out there who'd get to help you find somewhere else." She didn't respond, just stared at me like I'd slapped her. And maybe I had only with words, not hands. That night, I sat in my recliner with a glass of sweet tea, and the windows open. The house was still. Mine. But I wasn't just satisfied. I was planning something else. Because if they thought the locks were the end of the story, they hadn't seen the cabin. The one on the lake. The one with the bigger key. The one they didn't even know existed. 3 days after I told Celeste she'd have to earn her place under my roof, I packed a suitcase. Nothing dramatic. Just the essentials. A week's worth of clothes. My tea kettle. Carl's old radio and the deed to the cabin. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I just left a note on the fridge. "Gone to clear my head. Please don't touch my things. Mom." I could already hear Celeste scoffing, calling it a stunt. But I wasn't running away. I was letting them sit in the house they treated like a free hotel and feel what it was like without me. No laundry done. No dinner cooked. No groceries stocked. No soft voice singing to the grandkids before bed. Just silence and their own entitlement. I drove up to the lake cabin in the early afternoon. It sat on a quiet stretch of forest road, tucked between two sleepy pine ridges. The gravel crackled under my tires as I pulled up. The cabin was still beautiful. 2 stories, wide porch, wraparound deck, and a view of the water so still it looked like glass. It needed a bit of dusting, sure, but the bones were strong, like me. I turned the lock and stepped inside. It smelled like cedar and thyme, a little musky but not unpleasant. Like memories sealed in wood. I made myself a cup of tea and sat out on the porch as the sun started to dip. It was the first time in months I'd felt peace that didn't come with strings. The phone buzzed 3 times that evening, all from Brian. I didn't answer. Let them wonder for a while. The next morning, I woke up early and took a walk down to the dock. Carl used to sit at the edge with his feet in the water and a cup of black coffee in hand. I did the same. It was quiet, the good kind of quiet. No whispering behind closed doors, no tension filling the air like smoke, just birdsong and wind. By noon, I finally called Brian back. "Mom, where are you?" His voice was sharp with panic. "I'm safe," I said calmly. "At the lake." "What lake?" "The one where Carl and I bought the cabin. The one that's still in my name." "You left?" he asked, as if I hadn't already told him that in the note. "You can't just disappear." "I didn't disappear, Brian. I just removed myself from a home where I was being treated like a burden." He was quiet for a moment. "The kids miss you." I softened a little. "Tell them I'll be back. Maybe. If things change." "Celeste is upset. She can stay upset," I said. "Or she can reflect. I'm not the maid. I'm not a placeholder. I'm your mother. I built that home with my hands and heart, and if I'm going to share it, I need to know I'm respected." He exhaled. Are you selling the house?" "I'm thinking about it." Another pause. "Is this about the Social Security thing?" "No, Brian. It's about everything. The way she tried to sneak around me, the way you let her, the way you both forgot that I'm not dead yet. And even when I am, I deserve dignity." He didn't argue, which told me everything. The next 2 days passed peacefully. I cleaned the cabin, opened all the windows, and started making a grocery list. I called Arlene and asked if she'd like to come visit. She arrived an hour later with 2 pies and a bottle of wine. "Look at you," she said, stepping inside. "You weren't kidding about that view." We sat on the porch for hours, talking about everything and nothing. "You know," she said, "when Carl passed, I was so sure you'd sell this place. I almost did, I admitted. But something told me to keep it. Good thing, she said, because you may have just saved your sanity with it. Back at my main house, things weren't going so smoothly. Brian called again that Friday night. Celeste found a buyer. I blinked. A buyer. For the house, he said like it was a normal sentence. She thinks you'll calm down if you see how much we can get. She doesn't own the house. I know. And she won't be listing it, I said. Because the deed is locked in a trust. And any unauthorized listing would be considered fraud. He groaned. She's desperate, Mom. She doesn't think you'll come back. I'm not sure I will, I said honestly. He didn't know what to say to that, so I hung up. That Sunday, I got a knock at the cabin door. It was Judith, the lawyer. I thought I'd stop by with some papers, she said, holding a thick envelope. And maybe see the famous lake house. I invited her in, and we sat by the fire while she explained her idea. I've drafted an addendum to the trust, she said. If you choose to list the main house, we can legally stipulate that proceeds go into a private fund entirely under your control. Retirement income, travel, anything you like. And if I don't sell, I asked. She smiled. Then we simply add the cabin as a second protected asset. I sat with that for a while. Carl and I had bought both properties with love, but only one felt like love still lived there. On Tuesday, I returned home, just for a few hours, to see the place. Brian was waiting in the living room. Celeste stood in the kitchen, pretending to be busy, but her eyes were sharp and watching. You came back, he said. For now. I walked through the rooms slowly. My rooms, the bedroom, the garden, the porch I used to sit on with my grandkids before Celeste started rolling her eyes every time I told a story. Why now? He asked. I turned to him. Because I wanted to see if it still felt like home. And does it? I looked at the hardwood floors, the curtains she'd swapped for something trendier, the empty spaces where Carl's photos used to hang. No, I said, it doesn't. Celeste's face hardened. Then maybe you should sell, she said coldly. I smiled. Maybe I will, but not to you. She looked confused. Arlene made an offer, one that values more than just square footage. She values me. Brian blinked. You're selling to Arlene? Maybe, I said. Or maybe I'll just keep the cabin and rent this one out. Either way, I'll be deciding alone. That night, I went back to the lake. I sat on the deck, stars overhead, tea in hand. For the first time in years, I felt safe. Safe from manipulation. Safe from being erased. They wanted me out? Fine. Now I was gone, and so was their free ride. I never wanted a war. I wanted peace, just like any mother would. I didn't want a trophy or applause. I just wanted to live out the rest of my years in my own home, surrounded by family who respected me. But Celeste didn't understand quiet dignity. She mistook my silence for surrender. And that was her biggest mistake. It all came to a head 1 week later. Brian had invited me back to the house. He claimed Celeste wanted to talk things through and start fresh. He said she had matured during my time at the cabin. I knew better. But part of me still hoped I'd walk into a kitchen filled with apologies and warmth. I packed an overnight bag just in case and drove back into town. When I stepped through the front door, I knew it was a setup. The house was filled with guests. Strangers mostly, neighbors. Brian's coworkers and Celeste's old high school friends. People who didn't know a thing about me but were happy to sip wine on my porch and eat off dishes I'd bought with my first paycheck. As a married woman, the dining room table was decorated with linen napkins and fancy silverware. Candles flickered beside place cards, and in the center sat Celeste, beaming like a queen. Oh, she said with feigned surprise. You made it. I looked around. What is this? It's just a little dinner party, she said. We thought it'd be a good time to ease back into things, break the ice. I forced a smile. Interesting. Who are these people? Oh, she said, waving her hand. Just friends. Don't worry, we didn't expect you to cook. I stared at her. She knew exactly what she was doing. You planned a party in my house and didn't tell me. Brian appeared beside me, rubbing the back of his neck awkwardly. We didn't think you'd mind. You weren't here and Celeste wanted to make the place feel social again. My blood started to boil, but I stayed calm. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water, trying to swallow the lump rising in my throat. Then I heard it, Celeste's voice from the dining room, loud and clear, for everyone to hear. She's sweet, sure, she said to one of her friends. But honestly, she's kinda dead weight, always hovering, always watching. I mean, she's not even working. What does she do all day? Someone laughed. Another person whispered something I couldn't make out. And just like that, something inside me snapped. I'd put up with insults behind closed doors. I'd swallowed disrespect, dressed as kindness. But now in my own home, she was ridiculing me like I was some forgotten coat in the back of a closet. No, not tonight. I set the water glass down slowly, walked to the hallway, and opened the circuit breaker panel. I flipped the switch. One by one, the lights in the house went out. Gasps, shuffling, confused murmurs. The dining room fell into darkness. I walked back in and stood at the archway, lit only by the fading glow of the last candle. I may not work a full-time job anymore, I said, but I still know how to pull a switch when I need to. Everyone turned, eyes wide, mouths silent. Dead weight? I continued. I built this home. I raised the man you married. I kept it running when all you brought was chaos and complaints. If you think I'm just here to fill a chair and smile quietly while you turn my house into a showroom for your ego, think again. Celeste stood up, flustered. You're embarrassing yourself. No, I said. I'm reclaiming myself. Brian finally spoke. Mom, let's just turn the power back on and talk. No, I said firmly. Let them eat in the dark. Let them see what happens when the one person who actually holds things together decides she's done. And then I walked upstairs, left them all blinking in the shadows. I stayed the night, but not because I wanted to. I wanted them to feel what it was like when I was in the house, but no longer available to be used. No laundry, no bedtime stories, no morning coffee. Just silence, and the cold edge of dignity returned. The next morning, I packed again. This time it wasn't temporary. I walked into the kitchen where Brian was sitting with a mug in hand. Where are you going? He asked quietly. I'm moving full-time to the cabin, I said. You and Celeste can manage this place however you like. I'll be removing it from the trust within the week. His eyes widened. Wait, what? I'm putting it on the market, but not for you. For a buyer who respects its history. And me. Mom, this is our family home. No, I said gently. It was our family home, but a family doesn't mock the one who made it. He swallowed hard. What about the kids? I'll still be grandma, I said. You can bring them to the lake, but this house, you two decided I didn't belong in it, so I finally agreed. By noon, I was gone, back to the lake, back to peace. I called Judith from the porch. It's time, I said. List the house, and make it clear. No negotiations with the current tenant. She understood. A week later, I received a call from a realtor I trusted. The house will likely appraise a little lower than expected, she said. Why? I asked. Because the current occupants made some changes without permits, unpermitted additions, poor landscaping, and those solar panels Celeste installed. They're leased, and the buyer would have to assume the contract. I laughed. Funny how things fall apart when the foundation isn't respect. Celeste tried to call. I didn't answer. Brian sent a text. I'm sorry. I read it, then put the phone down. Some apologies come too late, and some homes, no matter how beautiful, stop being home the moment someone calls you dead weight at your own table. The morning of the open house, I woke up early and made myself a cup of Earl Grey. The sky above the lake was pale blue and cloudless. It looked like peace. It smelled like freedom. I slipped on Carl's old flannel shirt, tied my hair back, and stood on the porch of the cabin with my tea in hand. I could already imagine the chaos brewing back at the other house. I hadn't told Brian or Celeste when the house was being shown. That wasn't my responsibility anymore. Judith had arranged everything with the realtor. The property was no longer in my trust. It was now under my name only, and I had full discretion to sell, with no obligation to notify the current tenants until a formal offer was accepted. Brian had stopped calling. Celeste tried once more, left a message saying, "You're being heartless. We're family." I didn't respond, because if I was so heartless, they wouldn't have noticed my absence in the first place. The open house began at 11:00 a.m. By 11:30 I got a text from Judith. 3 serious buyers, one made an offer already. Full asking price. Buyer is a single mother from Vermont. She asked if the house had been loved. I told her yes. I smiled, because it had been, not by Celeste, not by recent years of tension and entitlement, but by the history I had built inside those walls. The children's height marks on the hallway wall. The sunroom, Carl and I had repainted one spring. The old garden gate, that still squeaked, just a little too loud. Those things still mattered. They just needed someone new to appreciate them. The next day, I got another message, this time from Brian. "Did you sell the house? We saw strangers walking through it yesterday." I let the phone sit in my lap for a long time. Then I typed back, "I didn't slam the door on you, but the buyer might," and I left it at that. Celeste, naturally, didn't take it well. She came storming up to the lake cabin 3 days later, uninvited. She parked crooked on the gravel and marched up the porch steps, like she still had a right to do anything in my life. "You can't just throw us out," she shouted, not even bothering with a hello. I remained seated on the porch, book in hand, calm as a breeze. "I didn't throw you out," I said. "I sold a house I owned. You blindsided us." "No," I said. "You blindsided yourselves. When you called me dead weight, when you tried to sneak control behind my back, when you assumed my silence was permission." She huffed. "Where are we supposed to go?" I shrugged. "I don't know, Celeste. Maybe the same place you thought I belonged when you stuck me in the laundry room." She opened her mouth to argue, but then she saw I wasn't angry. I was done. And that scared her more. "I have kids," she said finally, voice cracking. "Yes," I said, standing. "And they deserve to be raised in a home where respect flows in both directions. Maybe now you'll teach them that." She stood there for a few seconds, stunned, then turned and left. No apology, just footsteps and dust. 2 weeks later, the house was officially under contract. I met the buyer. Her name was Tara. She was a nurse, recently divorced, with 2 little boys, and the kindest smile I'd seen in years. We walked through the house together. She asked about the garden, about the fireplace, about the creaky stairs. "I want to make this place ours," she said, "but I also want to honor what it's been." I nodded, and I handed her the original deed tucked safely in a folder. The same one I had hidden the day Celeste went snooping for inheritance papers. "It's been waiting for someone like you," I said. On closing day, Brian finally showed up at the cabin. He looked tired, older, like life had finally caught up to the illusion he'd been living. He stood at the edge of the porch, holding his car keys. "They're moving into an apartment," he said. "It's not ideal, but it'll do." I nodded. "It will. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry." "Are you?" He looked down. "Yes, I should have spoken up sooner. I should have stood by you. You still can, I said softly. But not for the house, for your kids, for yourself. He nodded, slow and heavy. I brought this, he said, pulling something from his jacket. It was a photo frame. Inside it, a picture of Carl holding baby Emily in the backyard, both of them laughing under the old oak tree. I thought you'd want it here, he said. I took it, and for the first time in a long time, I hugged my son. I hope you remember this next time someone tells you silence is easier than truth, I whispered. He nodded into my shoulder. The cabin became my sanctuary. I planted new flowers, painted the kitchen yellow, like Carl always wanted, hosted Arlene for tea every Thursday. And yes, sometimes Brian and the kids came to visit. They didn't stay overnight, but they brought laughter, cookies, and a new sense of respect. I was no longer the invisible grandmother in the laundry room. I was Margaret Hartley, woman of the lake, keeper of 2 homes, protector of her own dignity. They tried to reduce me to silence, but the truth, the locks were always mine to change, and the door I shut, it didn't slam, it closed quietly, firmly, and forever.